In a universe where war and betrayals are as common as they are devastating, where blood stains the heavens and hells alike, no tale drips with more heavenly righteousness and hellish blood than that of Zariel. Once an embodiment of celestial valor, now the Archduke of Avernus, the first layer of hell. She is both admired and feared across multiple realms. Her story is fraught with divine righteousness, epic betrayals, and a good amount of blood. This is the paradoxical, heart-wrenching tale of Zariel, the true divine tragedy of Dungeons & Dragons. Zariel is not mentioned until the second Advanced Dungeons & Dragons edition. She is set up immediately, with no background, as one of the Archdukes of Hell, specifically throwing Zariel into an event called the Reckoning. It is said that she rules the first layer of Avernus. The Reckoning started on Avernus. Zariel had prepared an enormous army, allegedly to lead against the Tanari demons in the Blood War. But at the last minute, she led this army into Dis, another layer of hell, and laid siege to the city itself. This was the start of the war, the Reckoning. Millions died in this war, and many betrayals happened. But the greatest betrayal happened to Zariel herself. Belle is perhaps the greatest success story of Hell. He climbed the ranks of Devilkind through his prowess in battle. He was given command of all the armies of Avernus and became the right hand of Zariel. Zariel ultimately is unsuccessful in the Reckoning, trying to overthrow Asmodeus along with the other lords. But it does show a glimpse of her vision, ambition, and power, the only glimpse we get of her as a ruler of Avernus. In time, Zariel came to trust Belle, and in the most dramatic coup in the history of all Hell, Belle turned Zariel's court against her and then overthrew her. Belle could not kill Zariel, but instead chose to imprison her and render her powerless. He then declared himself Lord of Avernus. Zariel and Belle both assumed Asmodeus would not appreciate and stand quiet while this coup happened. Though much to Belle's surprise, Asmodeus had actually chosen to support Belle and was a large part in the revolution that led to Belle overtaking the first layer. Asmodeus wanted Belle in control instead of Zariel so he could lead their armies against the Blood War. Although Zariel was powerful, she had too much ambition. Belle simply wanted to repel all demonic forces in the Blood War, and he was loyal to Asmodeus. And so, with the first look we get of Zariel in 2nd edition, she has already been overthrown as the leader of her own plane. Betrayed by both Asmodeus and her right-hand man, Belle, imprisoned indefinitely. In 2nd edition Dragon Magazine 223, Zariel is not mentioned much. It has already been established that she has been overthrown. And though we do not get an exact mention of her, Zariel is the subject of some of the lore of Avernus, where it states, the original Lord of Avernus, not Tiamat, contrary to popular belief, found herself imprisoned and entrapped by her warlord, the pit fiend Belle, thousands of years ago. She now struggles to break free, but her struggles become weaker and weaker as Belle siphons more of the Lord's power for himself. For all intents, Belle is the new warlord of Avernus, and that suits the other lords just fine, as they have not lifted a finger to aid their ensnared sister. Because of this, Avernus has become a little fiercer and more brutal than it was under Zariel's command. Next on to 3rd edition, we get quite a bit more of this continued lore of Zariel's story, starting with the Manual of the Planes. In the Manual of the Planes, we also get some information about Belle, and it is whispered by his subordinates that Belle still keeps Zariel prisoner somewhere deep in the Bronze Citadel so that he can siphon her hellish power into himself, increasing his own abilities while reducing her to another soul shell. Many other lords of hell will not help Belle. He has yet to stabilize Avernus or establish himself in these thousands of years. And surprisingly, Zariel herself offers him the greatest aid. For deep in the Bronze Citadel, Zariel languishes under the cruel knives of Abishai torturers that carve off bits of her flesh to feed to their master. While there is more about Belle in 3rd edition, nothing is revealed about Zariel besides the fact that she perhaps is his greatest strength. Most of the power that controls of Avernus, most of its defenses, are still all generated by Zariel, but controlled by Belle. She is instrumental to the first layer, and Belle has realized that simply supplanting her or killing her is not good enough. To truly rule it, he has to work with her, and though Zariel is being reduced to a husk, it's only a matter of time before her will gives out, or she can break back against her oppressor. Thankfully, we can actually skip 4th edition going ahead and changing all the lore, as Zariel is not really mentioned throughout any of the source books. We see her in Dragon Magazine reinforcing some of the things that we already know, but in terms of rewriting her history, thankfully, we can skip this time. And finally, where we all know Zariel from, 5th edition, where she is fully fleshed out, the entire story laid before us, and she is actually the feature of Baldurs Gate Descent into Avernus. And fair warning, there will be slight spoilers for that module. We are thrown right into the mix in 5th edition. Before the module Descent to the Avernus, Zariel is mentioned quite a few times, and in a hand-wavy way we are told the Archduchess Zariel rules Avernus. We are left wondering if this is before Belle took over, but it is said that she has succeeded in supplanting her rival, Belle, who has fallen out of Asmodeus' favor. Though he is not imprisoned like Zariel was, instead he serves as Zariel's advisor. Finally, we also get a good description, where it says that Zariel appears as an angel whose once beautiful skin and wings have been ruined by fire. Her eyes burn with a furious white light that can cause creatures looking upon her to burst into flame. Surprisingly, this is the first time that we are told that she was an angel. She was an impetuous angel with a love of battle. In her previous life, she was charged with observing the battles on Avernus and tracking their progress. From this exposure, she grew obsessed with the blood war, and a thirst for battle grew within her that she could not ignore. In time, she became frustrated that she and the other angels were forced to remain spectators, while the demons and devils battled. The hosts of Mount Celestia, she believed, could descend upon Avernus en masse and wipe both hordes of evil from the cosmos if they so desired. After her repeated requests to join the fray were denied, her frustration overtook her, and she launched herself into the blood war, accompanied by a mob of mortal followers. She got a swath through a legion of devils before their numbers overwhelmed her. A delegation of bone devils later dispatched to the site by Asmodeus recovered her unconscious form beneath a small mountain of slaughtered enemies. After allowing her to recover in the depths of Nessus, Asmodeus installed her on Avernus as his champion and new lord of Avernus. Now technically this is changing the canon quite a bit. All mentions of Zariel taking over act like it is the first time she is taking over, and Belle is the current ruler. Never is she a prisoner underneath. Belle is the one who rose up and supplanted her. Now she is the one who rose down to hell and supplanted him. Not through some great betrayal, but by Asmodeus' own will. But don't worry, just because we lose a betrayal in the lore does not mean that we are without them. For in Descent to Avernus, we get a much more detailed story of Zariel's fall from grace. As we know, Zariel left Mount Celestia. In Descent into Avernus, we realize she went to Elturel, where she rallied an army of warriors and trained them to fight in the Blood War. She promised them that when they were ready, she would lead them. And so, 54 DR, Zariel led an epic charge known as the Ride. Zariel's army entered Avernus and took the fight to the archdevil Belle and his infernal legions. Many of Zariel's warriors fought bravely, but for most, the horrors of the Nine Hells proved too great. And so, they fled, back through the portal, sealing it behind them and never revealing their shameful retreat and betrayer. The Hell Riders, as they were called, would wear this badge of shame to their graves. Zariel lost more than her army that day. She also lost a hand, severed in battle. As her sword fell to the ground, Zariel ordered Yale, her most devoted general, to take her sword and hide it so that the devils would not destroy or corrupt it. Zariel's other two generals, Olanthius and Haruman, refused to leave Zariel's side. All three were captured and sent to Nessus, Asmodeus' lair of hell, the deepest. There, Zariel was brought before Asmodeus, who welcomed her with open arms. The Lord of the Nine commended Zariel for her battle prowess and the strength of her convictions. he offered her rulership of Avernus, much to Belle's chagrin. By swearing fealty to Asmodeus in the Nine Hells, Zariel could bring her rage to bear against the demons and continue to fight in the Blood War, with legions of devils under her command. Zariel accepted Asmodeus' terms, completing her fall from grace. Haruman followed his master into damnation willingly and was transformed into a Narzugon devil, while Olanthius took his own life instead of bowing to Asmodeus, though he was brought back against his will to serve as a Death Knight under Zariel's burning gaze. Zariel never forgot her betrayers, those who ran from the battlefield, and even during the fighting of the Blood War, she kept a close eye on Elturel. And finally her day came as Elturel was conquered by a vampire lord. A priest of Torm named Thavius Krieg appealed to any power to help him save his holy city against this vampire lord, and in that instance, Zariel emerged from a pillar of fire and offered him a deal, which Thavius readily accepted. In the sky over Elturel, a radiant sphere called the Companion appeared, blazing like a second sun, powered by a planetar imprisoned within it. The Companion bathed Elturel and the surrounding countryside in holy light, which did defeat the vampire lord and laid waste to his armies. Thavius Krieg took credit for the summoning of the Companion and was hailed as a savior and rose to become its high overseer. Thavius was told the exact time when the Companion would cease to protect Elturel. Thavius Krieg fled Elturel in secret and watched from a safe distance as the Companion transformed from a radiant sun into a black orb awash with crackling energy. It ripped Elturel from the material plane, transporting it and all its inhabitants into Avernus, Zariel's revenge. Throughout Descent into Avernus, we see a glimpse into the Blood War, how Zariel fights her power to take on Balors and Demon Lords alike. And of course, it being a Dungeons and Dragons module, there are many endings that can happen based on the players, including a redemption of Zariel, where, reunited with her sword, she redeems herself. And though D&D is a story of many endings, paths, and choices, typically there is an accepted ending. We can glimpse these endings from future products of D&D to see what really happened in these stories. The most definitive answer we have right now comes from the game Baldurs Gate 3, which I will say very light spoilers for. Essentially, Zariel's name is mentioned many times, and since these events take place after Descent into Avernus, we can confirm Zariel is still the Lord of Avernus. Though a group of adventurers did end up saving this city, Elturel, we find ourselves in a world rife with consequences of that city coming back into the material plane. And so while 5th edition is the first edition to really expand upon this character of Zariel, it also leaves her story halfway through. Zariel has many possibilities from here on forward. We have seen that she has the capacity to redeem herself, as her only hope, only wish, is to rid the world of one of the nastiest, most devastating wars. And Zariel is right in the fact that if the demons ever managed to win, it would most certainly be the end of most of life as we know it. And so while the Blood War has been in a stalemate for thousands of years, Asmodeus most certainly has a plan. He would not have supplanted Belle, one of his most trusted dukes, if he did not have a grand scheme of how he can overcome this age-long war. Zariel will be the most important piece of this story as it progresses. Her most important quality is that Zariel is not just a character. She's a living testament to the complex duality of good and evil and its interactions in D&D. With a story drenched in celestial ambition and infernal intrigue, Zariel reminds us all, in the grand tapestry of existence, even angels can fall.